The Nightmare Ride, a tale of survival and terror. I still don't know how I survived that night, but I can tell you everything that happened. The terror, the cold, the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, waiting for me to make the wrong move. It started like any other cold winter evening. I had just finished a long day at work and was heading home. The train I was supposed to take had been delayed, again, and the storm outside was only getting worse. The snow was falling in sheets, so thick I couldn't even see the lights from the nearby shops. I knew I couldn't wait any longer, and walking home in this weather was out of the question. So I called for a cab. The cab that arrived was old, worn even. The headlights flickered like they were struggling to stay on, and the engine groaned in a way that sounded almost wrong. But I was too exhausted, too cold, to think much of it. When the driver opened the door for me, I remember hesitating for just a moment. His face was pale, his lips cracked from the cold, but I shrugged it off. I was tired. I just wanted to get home.
"Where to?"
he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Center of town," I replied, not even thinking about it. I settled into the back seat, pulling my coat tighter around me. The car pulled away, and we moved deeper into the heart of the storm. Outside, everything blurred. The snow, the dark sky, the bare trees. It felt like we were the only two people left in the world, as if the rest of everything had vanished. I tried to make conversation, something, anything, to break the silence. But the driver didn't respond. He just kept his eyes on the road, gripping the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. It felt off, but I couldn't explain why. I just pushed the feeling aside and stared out the window, watching the snow whip past. Minutes passed, then the car suddenly slowed to a stop. I blinked, confused. Why are we stopping? The driver didn't answer. He didn't even move at first. Then he turned his head slightly and his eyes locked with mine through the rearview mirror. They were cold, empty really, and for the first time I felt that deep, primal fear. My heart started to race, my blood turning to ice in my veins. "You shouldn't have gotten in," he said, his voice flat as if he were stating a fact, not making a threat. I froze, my mouth going dry. What the hell was going on? He didn't explain himself. Instead, he reached for something. I couldn't see it at first, but then I noticed the gleam of steel, a knife long and sharp. My breath caught in my throat. I should have run, but in that moment I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do, what to think. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. And then, God, it happened so fast. He lunged at me. The knife flashed, and before I even realized it, he had slashed at my neck. Pain exploded in my throat, and I felt hot blood spilling down my skin. I gasped, my hands flying to my neck, but the warmth quickly turned cold. Desperation surged through me. I didn't want to die here, not like this. I had to get out. I fumbled with the door handle. My fingers were slick with blood, but I managed to pull it open. The cold hit me like a slap, sharp and biting, but I didn't care. I tumbled into the snowdrifts, my body crashing into the cold earth. The moment I hit the snow, I scrambled to my feet, not caring how much pain I was in. I had to run. I couldn't hear anything at first, just the sound of the wind screaming through the trees. But then, I heard it, the crunching of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, like he was enjoying the chase. The driver. He was coming after me. I don't even remember how I ran, just that my feet were slipping in the snow, my body aching with every movement. I looked behind me once, but all I saw was the blinding white of the storm. The taxi was gone. I couldn't see him anymore, but I knew he was there, watching, waiting. I couldn't stop. I had to get away. I don't know how long I ran or how I found that farmhouse. All I remember is knocking on the door, feeling my strength draining from me with every passing second. A woman answered, her face a mask of shock when she saw me. Blood was dripping from my neck and I could barely keep myself upright. I don't even remember much after that. The woman called an ambulance, but I just couldn't focus. I was too terrified, too cold. My body felt like it was shutting down. I wish I could tell you that the terror ended there, but it didn't. I thought I had escaped, that I was safe in that farmhouse. But the nightmare wasn't finished with me. After 15 days or so, the police came to my house, and I remember seeing their faces, grave, solemn, as they told me what they'd found. They'd caught the driver, they'd tracked him down. It didn't bring me the comfort I thought it would. In fact, it made everything feel worse, much worse. They said that the driver, the man who had nearly killed me, was no ordinary cabbie. His name was Jack Holloway, and he had been working in Ashford for years, picking up unsuspecting passengers like me. What they didn't know, what I didn't know, was that he had a dark secret. Holloway was a serial killer. Over the past decade, he'd been targeting people in isolated areas, pretending to be a simple cab driver. But when he had them alone in his car, when they were at his mercy, that's when he'd strike. But then, over time, his killings became more frequent, more brutal. But it all unraveled when they found his cabin in the woods, hidden away just on the outskirts of town. The police had been investigating disappearances in the area for months, and they finally had enough evidence to bring him in. Inside the cabin, they discovered a terrifying collection of trophies, photographs, personal items, and pieces of clothing from his victims. It was clear he'd been keeping them for years. He hadn't just been killing, he had been stalking, savoring every moment. Every life he took was just another game to him. They told me that I was lucky to be alive, that I had narrowly escaped a fate similar to the others. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt numb, hollow. What scared me the most was when they told me how he'd been caught. He hadn't been trying to hide. He was just waiting for the next victim. When they found him, he didn't resist. He didn't even try to flee. He smiled when they arrested him. "Why?" I asked one of the officers, my voice barely a whisper. "Why did he do it?" The officer looked at me, his face tight with disgust. Because he liked the fear, he liked the chase, he liked knowing he had control over their lives, and when it was over, he would move on to the next. The idea that this man had been lurking in the shadows, living among us, made my skin crawl. For days I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop hearing his voice in my head, that cold, emotionless tone as he told me, "You shouldn't have gotten in." I was told the trial would come soon. They had enough evidence now to put him away for the rest of his life, if not worse. But no matter what happened, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack Holloway was still out there in some way. The thought of him, of all the people he'd hurt, haunted me every waking moment. And every time I hear the sound of a car engine in the distance, every time I see the headlights of a passing vehicle in the snow, I can't help but remember that dark taxi and the man who drove it, the killer who almost claimed my life. I don't know if the world will ever truly be rid of him, because the most terrifying thing I learned from all this wasn't the horror of his actions. It was that there are people like him hiding in plain sight. And sometimes the only way you'll find out they're dangerous is when it's already too late. The police caught him, yes, but part of me will always wonder how many others there were, how many like him are still out there, waiting in the dark, in the snow, in the night.